Welcome to Black Arena, where we uncover the stories they never wanted you to know. If this is your first time here, you're about to discover why this channel has become the go-to source for suppressed historical truths. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what you're about to learn will change everything you thought you knew about the African diaspora. 120 million people. That's how many African descendants live in Brazil today. More than the entire population of most countries. More than live in Nigeria, more than in Ghana, more than in Kenya, and more than Cameroon. Brazil has the largest black population outside of Africa itself. Yet this story, this massive, profound story, has been buried under samba, soccer, and smiling tourist brochures. What if I told you that Brazil isn't just home to African descendants, but to a hidden African civilization that survived 500 years of systematic destruction? What if I told you that more Africans were brought to Brazil than to all of North America combined, and that their descendants built kingdoms, created religions, and forged an underground empire that exists to this day? This is that story. This is Brazil's hidden Africa. 4.9 million Africans stolen from their homeland, crammed into ships bound for Brazil. Between 1501 and 1866, Brazil received 10 times more enslaved Africans than the United States. 10 times from Angola, Congo, Nigeria, Benin, Ghana. Entire civilizations were transplanted across the Atlantic. But here's what they don't tell you. These weren't just slaves. These were master craftsmen, priests, warriors, artists, healers, and kings. The Portuguese deliberately targeted specific African skills: iron workers from Angola, gold miners from Ghana, cattle herders from the Sahel. Recent archaeological digs in Rio de Janeiro have uncovered African artifacts buried in slave quarters. Not just simple tools, but sophisticated ceremonial objects, mathematical instruments, and medical implements that reveal the advanced knowledge these people carried in their minds and hearts. They were scattered across Brazil's vast territory, from the sugar plantations of Bahia to the gold mines of Minas Gerais, from the coffee farms of São Paulo to the cattle ranches of Rio Grande do Sul. The colonizers thought they were importing labor. They had no idea they were importing entire civilizations. Quilombo dos Palmares, a name that strikes fear into the hearts of colonial authorities even today. Hidden in the mountains of Alagoas, African fugitives didn't just escape slavery, they built a kingdom. For nearly a century, Palmares was an independent African state in the heart of Brazil, complete with its own government, military, and thriving economy. At its peak, Palmares housed over 30,000 people, larger than most European cities of the time. They grew crops, forged weapons, created art, and traded with Portuguese settlers who officially considered them enemies. Zumbi das Palmares, their legendary leader, used guerrilla warfare tactics that wouldn't be seen in conventional military doctrine for centuries. He was a master strategist who kept colonial armies at bay for decades. But Palmares wasn't alone. Across Brazil, over 3,000 Quilombos dotted the landscape, from the Amazon rainforest to the southern plains. Each one a pocket of African independence, each one a testament to unbreakable spirit. The Brazilian government has officially recognized only a handful of these Quilombo territories. Why? Because acknowledging them means acknowledging that Brazil was never fully colonized, that African kingdoms survived, that resistance succeeded. The hidden truth is that Brazil has always been two countries: the Portuguese colony on the coast and the African kingdoms in the interior. They could chain their bodies, but they couldn't chain their souls. In the slave quarters of Bahia, something extraordinary was happening. African priests were rebuilding their temples, not in grand structures, but in hidden rooms, forest clearings, and the hearts of believers. Candomblé, Umbanda, Batuque, these aren't just religions, They are complete preservation systems for African knowledge. Every song contains ancient Yoruba wisdom. Every dance movement carries forgotten healing techniques. Every ceremony maintains direct connection to African ancestors. Recent studies have proven that Brazilian candomblé houses preserve African religious practices more authentically than many places in Africa itself because they were frozen in time, protected by secrecy, maintained by memory. In the toreros of Salvador, you can witness rituals unchanged for 500 years. Priests speak perfect ancient Yoruba, a language many of them learned not in school, but through spiritual possession by African deities. The Portuguese banned these practices. The Catholic Church condemned them. The government persecuted practitioners well into the 20th century, but they survived, they thrived, they conquered. Today, over 100 million Brazilians, including millions of white Brazilians, participate in Afro-Brazilian spiritual practices. The conquered became the conquerors. The suppressed became the dominant. Africa didn't just survive in Brazil. Africa claimed Brazil. They disguised warfare as dance. They hid rebellion in rhythm. They coded revolution in song. Capoeira. Watch it with untrained eyes, and you see a beautiful dance. Watch it with knowledge, and you see a complete African martial art system disguised as entertainment to fool slave owners. Every movement in Capoeira has a purpose. Every song tells a story of resistance. Every instrument carries the heartbeat of Africa. The berimbau, that haunting musical bow, is identical to instruments still played in Angola today. Samba, the world thinks it's just party music, but listen deeper. Every samba rhythm, every percussion pattern, every call and response structure comes directly from African religious ceremonies. Archaeologists have found drums in Brazilian slave quarters that are identical to ceremonial drums from West African kingdoms. The patterns, the materials, the construction techniques preserved across centuries and oceans. But here's the revolution. These African cultural forms didn't stay hidden. They exploded into mainstream Brazilian culture. They became the soundtrack of Brazil itself. Carnival, the biggest party on earth, is essentially a massive African religious festival that conquered Catholic Brazil. Millions of people parade through the streets in rituals that mirror Yoruba celebrations, wearing costumes inspired by African deities, dancing to rhythms that echo across the Atlantic. The slaves became the cultural masters. African Brazil conquered Portuguese Brazil through pure creative force. But the story doesn't end with cultural victory. It explodes into political awakening. In the favelas of Rio, São Paulo, Salvador, places the government calls problems, a new consciousness is rising. Young Afro-Brazilians are connecting the dots. They're realizing their neighborhoods aren't just poor communities. They're Quilombos, modern Quilombos, Movimento Negro Unificado, black feminist movements, hip-hop artists spitting truth in Portuguese with African rhythms, Capoeira masters teaching resistance philosophy alongside martial arts. DNA studies are proving what oral tradition always knew. Brazilian families carry genetic markers from specific African regions, connecting them directly to kingdoms, tribes, and ancestries that colonial records tried to erase. Universities are finally acknowledging Afro-Brazilian contributions to mathematics, engineering, agriculture, medicine. The innovations that built colonial Brazil's economy weren't Portuguese, they were African. Sugar refining techniques from West Africa, cattle raising methods from the Sahel, mining technologies from Ghana, architecture from Angola. Brazil was built on African knowledge, African labor, African genius. And now, finally, the children are remembering who they are. 120 million people, the largest African population outside of Africa. But this isn't just about numbers. This is about the most successful cultural preservation and transmission project in human history. This is about a people who turned survival into art, resistance into religion, oppression into creativity. Walk through any Brazilian city today, and you're walking through Africa. The music playing in the clubs, African. The food cooking in the restaurants, African. The martial arts practiced in the academies, African. The religions blessing the homes, African. The language might be Portuguese, but the soul is African. The government might be European-founded, but the culture is African-built. The history. Books might be written by colonizers, but the true story lives in the bodies, voices, and spirits of 120 million African descendants. Brazil isn't a country that happens to have a large black population. Brazil is an African nation that speaks Portuguese. This is Brazil's hidden Africa. This is the story they tried to bury. This is the truth that survived 500 years of suppression. This is what happens when Africa refuses to die. From Quilombo dos Palmares to modern Rio, from cannibal toreros to carnival stages, from slave ships to cultural conquest, Brazil's hidden Africa isn't hidden anymore. It's everywhere, it's everyone. It's the beating heart of South America's largest nation. If this video opened your eyes to a history you never knew existed, smash that like button and share this with everyone who needs to know this truth. Subscribe to Hidden Histories for more suppressed stories that challenge everything you thought you knew about our world. Hit that notification bell, because next week we're diving into another buried chapter of human history that will blow your mind. The ancestors are calling. Can you hear them? They're singing in Portuguese with African souls. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep uncovering the hidden truths of our world.